Okay, so hello everybody. Sorry about the technical difficulties. My name is Sarah Sembiante. I do work for the Institute for Educational Leadership, which is out of Washington, D.C. And specifically, I work for one of the federally funded through RSA technical assistance centers that work with voc rehab offices. And the technical assistance center that I work for is the YTAC, which is the Youth Technical Assistance Center. Just to give you a little bit about my background, up until a year ago, I worked for Arizona Vocational Rehabilitation. I was the statewide transition coordinator for voc rehab in Arizona. That is where I currently live as well. I work remotely with the Institute. And I do also have background in special education. I was a special education teacher and a special education director prior to entering into the voc rehab. And so here I am in my third career, kind of bringing it all together. And so here, this is some information on the Institute for Educational Leadership and, you know, kind of our mission and guidance there, guiding principles. There is, you know, our web address and things like that at the bottom. I mentioned to you that the Youth Technical Assistance Center is one of the federally funded technical assistance centers through RSA. And so I'm just putting these up here because you might hear me talking acronyms. You know how we like to do that. So whenever you hear me say YTAC, I'm talking about the Youth Technical Assistance Center. But the other technical assistance centers that we work closely with is the WIMTAC, which is the main technical assistance center that is assigned to help state voc rehab systems. The National Technical Assistance Center on Transition, the NTAC, that is what our education partners, you know, they work with the state education agencies to help develop, you know, transition services and also work along the guidance of the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. The National Collaborative on Workforce and Disability is actually another one of the IEL sponsored technical assistance centers. And as we move through this webinar, we're going to be looking, or I'm going to be mentioning a lot of resources that the NCWD Youth has specifically on the topic that we're discussing today. And so the Youth Technical Assistance Center, this is, you know, basically we are helping VR agencies and helping them with some of, you know, increase their referrals, helping them, you know, get more referrals of both in-school and out-of-school youth. We're helping with the WIMTAC, which is the other technical assistance centers that VR is working with. We're helping them with some of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act nuances and some of their planning, specifically with regards to the pre-employment transition services. And I'm going to mention those a little bit later when we're talking about voc rehab. I'm going to skip over these evaluation slides only because we are going to send out an evaluation. If you haven't gotten it yet, you will be getting it. And I just wanted to mention to you that, you know, your feedback is really valuable, and so whatever information you can let us know, specifically, you know, how you intend to use this information. And also, we're a newer technical assistance center, and we're looking to states, you know, needs. And so if you have any other, you know, webinar or training type needs, you know, please make sure you let us know that, and we can see if we can partner again with RAISE to bring some of those to you. Oops. Sorry. So today what we're going to talk about is we're going to, you know, look over the differences between high school and college for youth with disabilities. We're going to also look at effective family support practices while the youth is in college or helping them get ready for those college experiences. We're going to learn how families and support centers can support the transition into post-secondary education. We're also going to discuss the vocational rehabilitation connection and maybe some services that you could, you know, or how you get connected with the voc rehab agency, the local one. And then we also have some questions and answers from frequently asked questions, regarding youth with disabilities, and going to post-secondary education, and then tons of resources, probably more than you're ever going to need. But I wanted to make sure that you had plenty of resources to follow up with to help support your organizations. So some terms to know, and actually this list could probably go on for about 5 more slides. Different things that we're going to be talking about, obviously disability, IEP, the individual education plan that the schools have. What I should have put in there was IPE, because, we like to mess with you and use the same letters for things. The IEP is the school document. The IPE is the individualized plan for employment, which is the VR agency plan for employment. We also are going to mention 504 accommodation plans, goals and objectives as they relate to the various plans. Accommodations, things that, the students or youth can use in the classrooms that make the curriculum accessible. Modifications. Modifications is something that we talk about mostly in high school settings where some of the curriculum could be modified. Transition plan, depending on the state that you're in the IEP, which is the school plan, at age 16, that's what the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, they say that by age 16 there needs to be a transition plan in place. But some states do it at age 14, and so that can vary. Again, the IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities in Education. And then the ADA, which is the more, what's followed after at youth lead school. And also with the ADA, we're also going to talk about the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, the WIOA. I sound like I'm alphabet soup here. The WIOA, specifically regarding some of the mandates that it puts onto VR agencies with regards to youth with disabilities. So first we're going to talk about some differences between high school and college or vocational training, the applicable laws. So in high school, I've mentioned this before, that they have the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA. That really, drives accommodations, the transition plan at age 16. They also look at the least restrictive environment, meaning what is the least restrictive environment that a student can be in, with supports that's necessary, that they can show their highest rate of independence. IDEA is all about student success. And in high school also, they have 504 plans, which is part of Section 504 of the Rehab Act of 1973, and that also provides accommodations for disability-related needs. Whenever a student leaves high school and they go to college, they are protected under the Americans with Disability Act, in Title II, the laws and rights of adults with disability. ADA is more about access rather than success. They want to make sure that everything in the community is accessible in college and training programs, making sure it's accessible. And colleges and vocational training, they do provide reasonable accommodations for disability-related needs for students who maybe didn't have the IEP and that did seek services under the 504 when they were in school. So the next slide here talks about required documentation for accommodations. In high school, whenever a student receives special education services under an IEP, those IEPs, the Individual Education Program, is updated annually. 504 plans are also updated annually. Every 3 years in education, special education testing and evaluations are introduced as a possibility, to families and to the student support teams. Especially, upon entering special education, they do the evaluations and kind of go over those as a team. But then every 3 years, the team opts to whether proceed with special education services or maybe they need to evaluate to update, where student skills are and that kind of thing. Evaluation documentation is for eligibility and program planning while a student is still in high school, and it is updated every 3 years or as the IEP team decides. Whenever a student goes to college, they don't honor an IEP or a 504 plan in a college setting or a vocational training setting. And whenever you're talking about documentation that a college would need to provide reasonable accommodations, that IEP or 504 plan is not sufficient documentation. Evaluations, they will request evaluations from the family or from the student going into the school. They like to have them within the last 3 years. If the school evaluation is older than 3 years, student would need to get an evaluation and use, at their own expense if they're out of school. But there are some supports for that. And I'm mentioning this only because, families that are going through the school system, if you want to get it updated, you might want to be advocating those last couple years to really make sure an updated evaluation is done in the school. And then the documentation in college vocational training, the documentation must identify academic and functional limitations and recommended accommodations. And it should be signed and by a licensed professional that can make those disability determinations. So in high school and college or vocational training, there are some accommodations. I know a lot of youth that I've talked to said, oh, we can't have any accommodations in college, and that's not the case. They're different, and you need to go about getting them a little bit differently, but you can in fact get accommodations in college. In high school, some common accommodations are, having some readers, having readers for either in-class assignments or testing, note takers for in-class, or having notes provided to them for testing, extended time, modified assignments, meaning they don't need to do the full assignment, they do parts of the assignment. Sometimes students in high school will have modified tests, an open book or maybe with notes. High school students that are receiving special education services could have paraprofessional support. Some of that, like, maybe one-to-one or small group instruction on getting some of the regular or adapted classwork done. In high school, you have teacher advocacy, you have paraprofessional advocacy. They're advocating for the student. There's a lot of parent involvement. In high school, they do have the ability to do assistive technology kind of evaluations, but again, their reason for doing assistive technology is to meet the needs for the student while they're in high school. And so, if assistive technology is something that needs to be looked at for a college setting, then, we might want to look at some different avenues on how to do that, and we'll get to that later on in the presentation. And then again, the high school, the IEP meetings annually to support the student's success. In college and vocational training, there is no annual IEP. There is no 504 plan in place. Depending on what the training program is, some common accommodations are, having some note takers or getting some notes provided to the students, assistive technology as it pertains to the access to the site or to the curriculum. They do have things like separate testing, extended time. Some other ones that you won't see listed in here are some, things like tutoring or different, tutoring. Also, assistive technology pertaining to physical access. That's something that can also be provided if certain chairs or certain ergonomic, kind of setups in the classrooms need to happen. That can be arranged through the college. And now I do need to say a disclaimer here. I'm just talking general, and I am, every college and every training program might be different. And so, whenever I'm talking about common accommodations, that could look a lot different in a very small college that maybe doesn't have a disability resource center. And so these are just general. One big thing that is, very different when you look at high school and college is, assignments in the test, they cannot be modified or shortened, and that all students are expected to do all the work. And so when we're talking about, modified curriculum, or maybe students had curriculum that was at a different level in high school, that kind of thing is not going to happen in college. What can happen is really making sure the very best assistive technology is put into place, and making sure that, there's supports in helping the youth kind of keep track of their assignments and tests and that sort of thing. Did somebody have a question? Okay. So high school versus college, or college or vocational training, self-advocacy. This really is, to me, in working with youth for years, this is really a big piece. Self-advocacy is one of the most important skills youth need to learn while they're still in high school and develop those skills. I mean, even prior to high school, to just keep on developing those skills, because those self-advocacy, sorry, I can't talk, skills are crucial when it comes to, being successful in college and helping make sure everything gets set up. In high school, a student is identified by the school, maybe to receive some of those services, or maybe the families are asking the school to maybe look at doing some testing. They're all supported by the teachers, and the families are supporting. In high school, the school is responsible for arranging accommodations identified in the IEP and the 504 with the teachers. So, that special education case manager is really making sure that all of the general education teachers are following accommodations and that kind of thing. In high school, teachers are going to approach struggling students as if still assistance is needed, academically or socially or emotionally. And, you all as family members probably know that, that connection with the teacher is really key in helping, your youth learn some of those self-advocacy skills. But in college, it's a different ballgame. The student is responsible for identifying with the Disability Resource Center in order to receive accommodations. I'm not saying that the student needs to do that on their own. They might need some supports to be able to do that. But, arranging accommodations and communicating needs to the teachers is also the student's responsibility in college. A lot of my experiences is college, the Disability Resource Centers will set students up with like a letter or something that they can give to their teachers in their college classes to let them know. But again, if a student needs some support with that, or even practice, doing that kind of self-advocacy, that can be done prior to, entering the college environment. The students must self-advocate with teachers when they're struggling. This is probably one of the biggest pieces, is that teacher is not going to, make the effort to contact the Disability Resource Center or contact the, parents. At this point, family members, unless they have, unless they have guardianship, it's difficult because the college doesn't need to talk to them. And so there are ways that the student can allow for, do a release of information to allow like the Disability Resource Center to communicate with parents. But really in college or vocational training settings, the idea is that the student is going to take over a lot of those self-advocacy pieces. And, we'll talk more about some of the supports and ways to prepare. And in high school, the parent role. Again, we've talked about some of these things. In high school, a parent can access student records. I mean, a lot of the high schools these days have them all online, and you can just log in and see, grades and what assignments are missing. in high school, you know, parents are contacted when students miss classes. I remember, you know, being sick at home whenever I was a kid and getting the call from the office, you know, asking for my mother to make sure I wasn't skipping school and whatnot. But, you know, that's not going to happen in college. And parents can contact, you know, in high school, they can contact the teachers and advocate for the student. And so when you look at the difference between, you know, high school and college, a parent is not going to have access to the student records without the student's written consent. And then parents can't contact teachers to check on student progress or attendance. And then student, you know, the student does advocating for themselves. And so with regards to instruction, with regards to instruction, you know, in high school, again, this is just, I'm not going to go through all of these, but, you know, the instruction is different. You know, can't get, you can't modify or alter any of the curriculum. You can modify the pace of it. The assignments and tests can't be modified or altered. You know, there's a lot more reading and writing involved than most youth think about whenever they go into college. And so, you know, the other thing to think about with, you know, in high school, you can get a lot of your work done in a study hall, right? Or with help, maybe some support teachers, from some support of your teachers or paraprofessionals. But in college, that's not going to be the case. You know, if you have, for every hour in class, generally you have anywhere between an hour and 3 hours out of class. And so for a 3-credit class, you're looking at possibly 9 hours total, you know, outside of class to be prepared for that. And so that's always a big shocker for young people. I know that was a shocker for me when I went to college, whenever I graduated high school. And so thinking about the time management and keeping track of assignments and tests, that's going to be the student's responsibility. But again, these are things that, you know, we can maybe support, you could support as family members outside, and then also look at other ways to maybe bring VR or some other agency in to support some of that. I just have this here. This is just a list of different types of post-secondary education and training. You know, there's a lot of myths out there, I'm going to say, you know, that, oh, you need to have an 8th grade reading level to go to college, or, you know, somebody who's in, you know, adaptive classes in high school probably aren't going to do well in, you know, academic classes in college. I mean, you know, these are just some of the things that I've heard, but it's really important to understand that there's so many different types of training out there, and there's so many different levels of training. You know, for instance, the short-term certification program, that might not require, you know, depending on what the program is, again, I'm speaking very generally, that might not require a lot of, you know, academics, or maybe vocational training programs are more hands-on. There's also programs out there that are specifically designed for individuals with intellectual disabilities, and they are, you know, think college-type programs where they focus a lot more on life skills and accessing the community. There's also different ways to, you know, apprenticeships. There's different levels of degree, associate, bachelor, master, doctorate. And so just putting it out there that, you know, I know whenever I went to school, I thought that I could only attend a 4-year college. And, you know, there were a lot of other things that were available, you know, some type of vocational training program. And they range. Some of them are a week. Some of them can be several months. I mean, you know, just make sure that whenever we're helping youth look into training programs, that we're looking at all training programs.
Sarah, we have a question that popped up, and I'm not sure if you'll get to it later, but there is a question of what if the parent has guardianship, but the school refuses to discuss grades and accommodations with that guardian?
You know, I think it goes to like the whole ethos of, you know, a college teacher versus a high school teacher. And I'm just going to take my best guess at this, and just some things that I've heard. But you know, in college, really they really want the students to be the advocate there. And even when there's, you know, a permission to speak to parents, that kind of thing, you know, it's not typical, I guess, of a lot of the college students that these professors are used to working with. And so if there is a problem with, you know, that type of thing, I would reach out to the Disability Resource Center to, you know, kind of smooth that over or figure out maybe there's a way to work through the Disability Resource Center to connect with the teacher. I'm sorry that that happens, but unfortunately it does. I hope that that's, I don't, I'm not really sure how to answer that.
No, I think that's helpful. Thank you. And we can always go back to this at the end.
Oh, no, absolutely. And if you wanted to also follow up with me, I do have experience in working with, you know, professors that, you know, maybe didn't want to have the family involvement when it was really necessary for one of my youth that I worked with. So even outside of here, if you wanted to give me a call, I can help you. I can help you practice a script or something. Okay, so let's talk about how high school students can prepare. You know, whenever students in high school, they have a course of study, or, you know, that's on their transcript. They have a course of study that they need to identify in their transition plan. You know, just really making sure that the high school classes are matching up to those courses of study. The other thing is research, research, research. You know, whenever I work with youth, we did a lot of research and looking at different training programs, looking at different careers. Before, you know, going to college, making sure you understand that if you need to take an SAT, you take that in the timeline, you know, before you exit. Anytime a student can take college campus tours is a great idea. Finding out about supports available at post-secondary schools, like do they have a disability resource center? Do they have a tutoring center? Also, just that whole concept of developing good study skills, developing time management skills, and also, you know, developing self-direction skills. The information that are in these next couple slides, actually, and in that last one that I just did, it is in one of our resources that isn't quite out yet. It's in the NCWD, and we are going to look at resources at the end. But I just wanted to bring this up, that this particular publication that I got some of this information out of, it's called Navigating Your Students' Transition to Post-Secondary Education. And it's right now in the final phase of getting approved by ODEC. So it should be in there soon. But the effective family support in post-secondary education, setting career and post-secondary goals, helping youth engage in self-exploration, making sure they're doing a good job of identifying their interests, their skills, exploring career options, making sure that, you know, I come from a VR background. We are big on informed decisions, making sure that, you know, youth know about all of their potential options out there with regards to training, college, and also with regards to their career goals. You know, this is a really important question that I started asking youth whenever I was working with them. What do they want to gain from the post-secondary experience? You know, I've heard everything from, oh, I want to go to college because my sister, you know, went to college, or, you know, and not really sure what they want from it, you know. And so really making sure you have those discussions with youth about what they want to gain from that post-secondary experience. And then making the most out of the transition planning process. I will say that waiting until senior year, which is what I had to do with a lot of my VR clients when I was working in Voc Rehab, that's too late. You know, it needs to really be done. I'm a big fan of getting that started in grade school, really, you know, junior high, middle school at the latest, so that there's a good, you know, plan in place. Obtaining support. You know, for a student to get support, they need to learn about their strengths and weaknesses. I have sat down with so many youth that I would say, you know, disability, and they'd look at me like, what are you talking about? Disability, miss. I don't have, you know, because they think more of the disability meaning people who have more physical disabilities. And so, you know, I spent a lot of time in my VR career talking to youth about their disability and really looking at the strengths and weaknesses, you know, that individual has. Also talking about disclosure of disability. That's a big piece that, you know, I've been in trainings with youth where they will raise their hand and tell me every single thing about their, you know, autism, for example. And then, you know, that I'm like, oh my goodness, I hope he doesn't do this whenever he goes for, you know, a job interview or something, you know, but just having that discussion on appropriate disclosure and when. Understanding rights and responsibilities, going back to that whole IDEA versus ADA and the WIOA. And then also making sure we're looking into the disability resource centers at the colleges or vocational training. Getting to know the school, become familiar with the campus, practice daily activities, connect with students. Other ways, helping youth make informed decisions, promoting self-advocacy, assisting with money management. I mean, these are all, you know, things that that families can do at home to help support self-advocacy and help support independence. Working with disability resource centers, they place a very heavy emphasis on the students advocating for their own needs. We talked about a release of information, you know, disability documentation and diagnosis. That's something that the disability resource centers will need. Practice that initial meeting with youth. I know whenever I was a VR counselor, I would often have students come into my office and we would sit there and do role play, you know, because that was often the first time that a youth was really advocating for themselves. And so as far as parent centers, you know, or, you know, family centers like the participants on this line, you know, really just becoming familiar with local college and vocational training schools. Invite the college program representatives to come and speak with families. You know, see if you can get some bulk literature or some, you know, or provide some links to families on the different colleges in your area or vocational training. Providing VR program information or inviting VR representatives to speak with the families and youth is another way that you can, as a parent center, get involved. With regards to the Voc Rehab connection, I did want to mention that, and you've heard me say this, the WIOA and pre-employment transition services. Some of you might have heard them called PETs, but I don't like to call them PETs. I have been known to call them pre-ETs, but the pre-employment transition services, these are all services that, you know, VR has to offer. But, you know, with regards to aside from the pre-employment transition services, this right here is a list of some common services that VR does offer, that Voc Rehab does offer in either helping students prepare for college or helping support them while they're in college. And I do need to do a disclaimer here also that, you know, VR services are individualized and they must be necessary to meet the IPE goals. Some services might be dependent on economic need or state funding, and service support delivery varies from state to state. That's my disclaimer. An example is, you know, maybe, for example, Arizona, the state of Arizona, Voc Rehab, they do pay full tuition for students that go to, you know, colleges, provided that it's a it's an accredited college. However, other states that I've come across pay like 40% of the tuition or that kind of thing. Sometimes books and supplies are based on economic need. Transportation, like bus passes and that kind of thing, could be dependent on transportation or dependent on economic need. So I just wanted to put that out there. But what I was saying before, and I did get my slides confused, I do apologize, is VR has to provide these pre-Fs to all, to any eligible, person in the state. Now, to provide these pre-employment transition services, they do not need to be eligible for voc rehab. And so that's a big thing that kind of, like, with the WIOA and the passing of the WIOA, VR agencies are like, what? We have to provide services to students that are not even, eligible for VR. And this particularly it gets a little complicated when states are under an order of selection or have a wait list for services for VR. Even those individuals that are on wait lists, that aren't clients yet, could potentially or should be offered these required pre-employment transition services. And so those services are job exploration counseling, work-based learning, helping with post-secondary education, which is the big thing that we're talking here today, workplace readiness skills training for social skills and independent living skills, and then self-advocacy. Again, I just want to say I think self-advocacy should be numero uno, but I'm just going from the document that the WIOA has provided. So for you all to just kind of think about, how are the pre-employment transition services made available to students in your state, and then how do students access VR for the pre-ETs or any kind of additional services? So we're going to go through real quick because I know we're running out of time. We do want to have some question and answers. So these are all questions that we've already gone through, and so I'm just going to kind of go through them briefly and bring up the answers about accommodations, tutoring, assistive technology. Again, we've gone through these. I just want to get to the links at the end so that we can. When to ask for accommodations, that's done at every semester. Any other kind of accommodations, going through all the answers here. Talk to your disability resource centers. And then also VR, making sure you, do get connected with VR if that's something that can help the youth that you are working with. And so here we go with resources. And I'm going to just go through and tell you what the resources are. These are, kind of national resources on apprenticeships, just different kind of, college, like getting on Facebook, YouTube. I went onto the YouTube and I thought they were pretty cool. I used to do them with some of my students and they really enjoyed the videos. Student aid, how to get, how to apply for financial aid. Here are the sites on rights and responsibilities. There's your site for the ADA, and then also some questions and answers done by the Pacer Center. These are the National Collaborative Workforce Development on Youth. We have so many resources for this particular topic. And so if you look here, there's guideposts. There's also some of these, Hitting the Open Road, 411 on disability disclosure. These are also things that you can actually do with youth. See here, there's some info briefs on, supporting youth in college. Let's see here. And that's it. So now we can open up for questions.
Wonderful. That was great, Sarah. Thank you so, so much. So for any of you who are interested in asking a question, please type it in the chat box, and we will read it, and hopefully Sarah can answer all of them. So we really appreciate that. I see someone typing right now.
You know, and also, too, I am available if you wanted to shoot me an email, or, you know, if you really are just dying for another resource on something specific, please feel free to contact me.
Great. So there's 2 or 3 typing, so. Oh, yes. Access to the slides. So what you will have, Miriam mentioned this in the chat, down at the bottom on the right side of the screen, it says Raise Webinar PowerPoint. You can access it there, and then also after this presentation, we will post this PowerPoint up on our website, which is raisecenter.org, so R-A-I-S-E Center, C-E-N-T-E-R.org. And we'll also be captioning this session and posting the video and all of it on our Raise YouTube page so that there's multiple ways you can access it. So I guess that I'm going to ask you a question while people are thinking. What, you know, when a young individual who is an adult comes in for their first meeting with disability services or college, what should that meeting look like? Who should be talking? How can parents be supportive without controlling?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, and I think it depends. I think that it depends on the advocacy skills of that youth. You know, I would say that going in having a plan is better than just kind of going in without having a plan. And so I would recommend that, you know, for a family member maybe to speak to that, you know, to their child about, you know, the meeting, what's going to happen at the meeting, what they're going to be talking about at the meeting. You know, basically the first meeting with the DSR is usually kind of a, you know, this is the student, these are the student's needs, and, you know, really getting those accommodations set up. And so the more a student can talk about what helps them be successful, or the more a student can talk about maybe accommodations that they've had in high school, you know, that's the better. You know, it could be with students who has maybe some more significant needs and maybe have some needs with, you know, having a support person come in. You know, I have gone to DSR meetings, DRC meetings with, you know, my clients, and really just being there as like a guide, you know, and maybe, you know, I've done everything to have people have a paper in front of them so that they can look at things to respond to. You know, it just all depends.
Oh, okay. Wonderful. So I'm trying.
I'm sorry. A first meeting is going to look different depending on what college it is, but just making sure you're prepared and knowing what you're going into that meeting for.
Wonderful. Thank you. So here's another question. What do you do when a school district is pushing vocational classes instead of CTE classes, stating that they don't have the support for CTE?
Okay. So the question is, the school wants to do more of the academic versus the CTE, is that correct?
They want to do more vocational.
Oh, more vocational and not having the student participate in the CTE program?
That's what it looks like.
Okay. You know, I think the best thing that I can say here is advocate, advocate, advocate. Advocate for your youth. I mean, you know, this is a high school setting, and so, you know, I think that a family could definitely use this opportunity to advocate for the youth. You know, inquire about what kind of supports are in place. See how the, you know, because technically, if a student is involved in a CTE program at that school district, the special education staff should still be helping support them and put in accommodations. And so really just making sure that, you know, at those IEP meetings, you're vocal, and making sure that the youth is also vocal and showing that they want to participate in those classes.
Great. So at this point, that is the last question we have. If there are any others, quick type them in. We have someone
I see one other question here.
Oh, do you? Okay. Sorry, I have such a little...
Parents have some. Keep the class together. I'm not sure I understand Shannon's question. Parents have been told their child will not be able to.
Further elaboration on her question before, so I'm thinking that, I don't know about the OSHA part, but saying that if they're not even able to pass this, then the class...
You know, and find out about the OSHA testing. I mean, I've had to call on behalf of clients in the past to find out if there were accommodations on a test, only to find out, yes, in fact, there are, when a college told me, no, absolutely not. So, sorry.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. One or two more are type in, and we'll wrap it up. Or not. So a little more clarification there from Shannon. They're kind of using OSHA as the reasoning for not allowing CTE. It sounds like, to me, Shannon, I mean, I obviously am kind of connected to parent centers. If you're not working with an advocate, either from Educational Law Center in your state, parent center, or direct advocates, that's where I would go, because that sounds like a potentially legal situation. If they're using like a OSHA test to prevent individuals from going in CTE classes. So I would totally promote educational law centers, and most states have some form of that.
Right, and they also give you at an IEP meeting in the high school the parental procedural safeguards, and so that will also tell you who you can connect with to essentially resolve the situation.
Right. Wonderful. So
those kinds of things make me so angry.
I know, and it's not abnormal either.
No.
So it happens. So hopefully we gave you all some information. Number one, about being more supportive of families and how they can support their youth in post-secondary education. As we said, with some of these legal questions, we would recommend Disability Law Center, National Disability Rights Network, educational law centers for these types of questions, because although we can say, oh, go to the website, there's a lot to go into on some of that. So we really recommend.
Definitely.
Yeah. So Sarah, thank you so much. And as I stated earlier, and as Miriam put in the box, please complete the survey. That would be wonderful. It will also be coming to your email, but we thank you. And keep your eyes open for more Raise Center webinars in the future. So have a great day, everyone.
Thank you so much, Josie. I'd love to help you again in the future.
Yes, I hope. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye-bye now.